I appreciate your participation in this webinar today. In the Office of Nuclear Energy, we're certainly very proud of our interactions with the university community, and we view our support of and interactions with the universities as being absolutely fundamental to creating the next generation of leaders for the nation's nuclear energy expertise. Again, we're hoping that this will be a very useful presentation for you today and that it will encourage each of you to participate in our programs as well as provide the information that you'll need in order to participate. Nuclear power, as I trust all of you are well aware, is a vital, clean, reliable component of our baseload portfolio in this country today. It's providing roughly 20% of our power. It's providing almost 2/3 of our clean energy, avoiding large amounts of carbon emissions, and as I'll be saying in the next few slides, also is clearly recognized by the nation's leadership as presenting a component that will be essential as we look into the future of the country. We currently have 100 plants. They're enjoying excellent capacity factors, excellent safety records, and overall, nuclear power is a fundamental component of the nation's energy portfolio. President Obama has spoken on many occasions about the importance of nuclear power in the nation's energy portfolio. Some of his comments refer to the obligation to leave our children a planet that is not polluted or damaged. Certainly very, very important sentiments as we look towards the future of clean energy in this country. He also speaks to the importance of the plants that are currently under construction in Georgia and South Carolina as we begin to restart nuclear programs in this country and significant construction programs. Our new secretary, confirmed a few months ago, Dr. Ernie Moniz, is probably well known to many of you. Certainly had an extremely distinguished career in academia at MIT, in government. He's previously been active in the Department of Energy, in OSTP. Many of you will remember that he was a co-author on a series of important reports at MIT on the future of nuclear power. He was a member of the Blue Ribbon Commission and certainly brings just a wealth of expertise on the widest possible range of energy issues, but specifically on nuclear energy, to the department. And we've certainly welcomed him on board and look forward to his continued leadership in our endeavors here. The Secretary has spoken several times already in his brief tenure on the importance of nuclear energy. He's spoken to his commitment to ensuring the safe, secure, peaceful use of nuclear energy, and he's talked about the challenge that we have of reducing carbon emissions overall in the nation, as well as the role that nuclear energy can play as we move towards an atoms for prosperity, moving beyond atoms for peace that has guided us for a number of decades. The Office of Nuclear Energy, the mission is spelled out here. I could paraphrase this mission by saying that it's our job here and your job in working with us to help us understand the widest range of options using nuclear technologies that can support the possible future use of clean nuclear energy in the nation's energy portfolio. That requires evaluation of safety, security, environmental. The broadest range of issues that you can imagine needs to be considered within the missions of the Office of Nuclear Energy. We published a R&D roadmap in April of 2010. These figures are from that roadmap. We're in the process now of improving and reissuing that roadmap. But still, these basic points remain critical and key in our thinking. Our programs are oriented around the 4 key bullets shown here. The first, to evaluate technologies that help to maintain the safe, secure operations of the existing fleet of nuclear power plants. Second would be to look at opportunities for deployment of new plants. Not too many years ago, this focused on the NP 2010 program, which has now led to the passively safe large plants, which are now being built both in the United States and abroad. But that second bullet now would focus not only on advanced reactor technologies, looking at alternative coolants to light water, but also it would be in that area that we're looking with great enthusiasm at the possibility of small modular reactors. And I'll say a little bit more about that on the next few slides. The third bullet, while it may be very short, is also vital and refers to the nation's need for a sustainable nuclear fuel cycle. We certainly do not have a sustainable fuel cycle now in this country. There's great debate ongoing about different aspects of our activities here, and I'll say a little bit more about that on subsequent slides. And finally, anytime nuclear technologies are used, one must approach the subject with the idea that you must understand first any threats or risks of nuclear proliferation or nuclear terrorism, and we need to mitigate those risks as effectively as possible in all that we do. But with those four objectives then, we pretty much frame the entire portfolio of the Office of Nuclear Energy at the Department of Energy. I won't talk in any great detail about our budget. You can study this at your leisure. But I should note that while we show here the FY14 request, we're currently operating under a continuing resolution for fiscal year 14, and we operated for the entire fiscal year 13 under a continuing resolution. So at this point, there remains substantial uncertainty about exactly what the funding levels will be in FY14, although at least the funding levels requested in the President's budget are shown here. Just to highlight a few areas on here, the Integrated University Program in the top line, shown at $5,000 in, or $5 million in FY12, that carried over essentially at that level in FY13 because we were under a continuing resolution. It remains to be seen whether the continuing resolution will extend throughout the year in FY14 or if there may be a budget, and if there is a budget, whether it will include the IUP program. So it's really premature now to know with any great accuracy what may occur on that line that in the past has supported scholarships and fellowships. The budget that you're seeing in FY14 certainly is a very austere budget. And you'll note a number of lines there where we have been forced to reduce very important activities down to relatively small levels. Advanced reactors is certainly one in which we do have concerns. Another area of substantial change in FY14 is the decision in the President's budget to move space power activities to NASA from the DOE budget. So you see a very large reduction there in the radiological facility line in which the space power activities have been conducted. But of course, under a continuing resolution, all of the activities from FY12 are simply continuing. And that is the current situation today. I think most of you would be well aware that we in the past, and I intend in the future, to dedicate about 20% of our R&D resources to the university community. We do this exclusively through competitive programs, and you'll be hearing a lot more about those competitive programs during the course of this webinar. On this slide will be several key areas of focus on which I'll concentrate for several additional slides. Small modular reactors are a strong interest for our program, and I'll give you a little more information on that. The recent work of the Blue Ribbon Commission on the back end of the fuel cycle and a number of activities that we have ongoing related to that. And then finally some comments on Fukushima Daiichi, the response to that accident. If we turn then to small modular reactor technologies, there's many reasons why we see the SMRs as potentially being of great interest in this country and potentially abroad. We've used the general definition of less than 300 megawatts, but I think a far more important definition is that these are systems that would be amenable to construction in a factory setting, utilizing factory quality control capabilities, and then moved essentially intact to a site that had been prepared to accept the reactor unit. So this would be quite a change from the largely stick-built activities that have gone on with the much larger plants in past construction in this country. We see a number of potential benefits for the small modular reactors. Certainly those of you in nuclear engineering are well aware that as you go with smaller systems, you do have more opportunities to introduce safety systems. You can have larger margins throughout the design of the reactor. And that goes in general, as I said, just with the fact that they are smaller and you've got more opportunities. But the reactors that we're focused on now certainly include passive decay heat removal, some of them for very, very long periods, essentially indefinitely in some of the designs that have been proposed. Since they're smaller, they have a much smaller source inventory, which may lead to reductions in the need for emergency planning around each of the facilities. But of course that would be determined through interactions with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission specific to each one of these designs. The SMRs that we're evaluating are suitable for below-grade siting. They're suitable for dry cooling, and therefore have the flexibility to operate in a wider range of environments than the very large plants. We see the potential for significant economic benefits. Certainly the overall size of the plants being much smaller also come with a much smaller initial payout, and that may lead to a far better match to the capitalization of any of the smaller utilities in the United States, or indeed with many of the utilities around the world. You also have the flexibility to add additional units as demand grows. One can essentially buy perhaps 1 or 2 units to start and then add units as the demand grows in a particular area. Within the United States, we see at least the possibility that as some of the older fossil plants are phased out based on emission concerns or on the infeasibility of adding carbon capture, we see these small modular reactors as potentially offering having a very important role in replacing those plants and taking advantage of the infrastructure that would already be existing around those plants. At the Department of Energy, we've initiated a licensing technical support program. It's been funded in the President's budget at somewhat under $500 million over a number of years. Our first funding opportunity announcement has been completed. That emphasized units that could be deployed by 2022. Our choice, after very careful evaluation there, was the Empower design led by Babcock and Wilcox. And we have now proceeded to issue a second funding opportunity announcement that would emphasize more innovative characteristics of the small modular reactors. We've been evaluating the submissions on that funding opportunity announcement, and depending on when you're viewing this webinar, you may find that we have already been able to make the announcement on that second funding opportunity announcement. Babcock and Wilcox, as I mentioned, has been selected for the award under the first funding opportunity announcement. I noted that Babcock and Wilcox was selected. Their unit is shown off to the right of that slide, roughly 180 megawatts electric, again suitable for underground siting, extremely robust safety case, extensive use of passive safety, and we are looking forward with enthusiasm to the submission to the NRC by Babcock and Wilcox of their design certification application, which we're anticipating in 2014. Again, that award has been made, and B&W and their team have been busily at work on the mPOWER design now for quite a number of months. Let me turn into the back end of the fuel cycle and preface my comments on the Blue Ribbon Commission by noting that in the opinion of the administration, certainly of the Secretary, certainly my own opinion, that the path on which the country has been focused, that is solely on Yucca Mountain as an underground repository, is simply not a workable solution. The very strong opposition in the state of Nevada to the use of Yucca Mountain has made it extremely difficult to progress through the process of fully evaluating and possibly licensing Yucca Mountain. Because of the difficulty from a workability standpoint, the President requested the Secretary to convene the so-called Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future. This commission made their report in January of 2012. There were 8 recommendations from the Blue Ribbon Commission as they laid out a path forward on the back end of the fuel cycle, which they believed would be far more likely to achieve success than the current mandate solely on Yucca Mountain. I'm not going to talk through each of these recommendations, and in general, certainly if you want details on the Blue Ribbon Commission report, that's available online. But let me just note that they start from the premise that it's important that the whatever decisions are made be made on a consent basis. In other words, on the basis of interest and willingness to support, on the basis of local, tribal, and state authorities' willingness to support progress on any of the facilities required on the back end of the fuel cycle. The Blue Ribbon Commission also suggested that we move ahead on both above ground consolidated storage site or sites and underground repository, or perhaps more than one. They also recognize that the current funding system that has been used in this country since the Nuclear Waste Policy Act amendments of 1987 simply has not worked to provide the funds collected from ratepayers and assure that those funds are provided back to the back end of the fuel cycle. So the BRC recommended changes in the way those funds are collected and dispersed, which would have the effect of providing far more certainty that funds collected from ratepayers of nuclear electricity are actually going to the purpose that was intended. The administration responded to the Blue Ribbon Commission's report with a January 2013 strategy document. That strategy document, to which many, many agencies across the government contributed, laid out the administration's view of the Blue Ribbon Commission's recommendations and in general strongly endorsed each of the recommendations. It started from the perspective that yes, consent basing should be used in siting of all facilities. From a systems design perspective, it concurred with an approach that would look towards, actually it suggested a pilot program for a storage facility, a smaller unit that could be used for the fuel from shutdown reactors, at least initially. Then moving to a larger consolidated storage facility and, of course, to a repository. On governance and funding, the strategy document endorsed the Blue Ribbon Commission's recommendation that there be a new entity created outside of the Department of Energy to focus solely on the back end of the fuel cycle and on developing specifically the facilities that are required, the consolidated storage, the repository, of course the transportation system that supports that. And in addition, the strategy spoke to the importance of funding sources that are reliable and that with confidence will be used for the purpose for which they are collected. So this strategy document was intended as a framework for discussions with Congress and with the hopes that Congress would be moving ahead with a legislative package that would enable us to advance with the recommendations of the Blue Ribbon Commission. There is significant congressional activity ongoing since the administration's strategy. A number of senators, bipartisan, with the chairman and ranking members of the key committees in the Senate of either Appropriations or Energy and Natural Resources, have worked most diligently to prepare Senate Bill 1240, which is now undergoing discussion on the Hill. It establishes the necessary processes. In general, it tracks quite well with both the Blue Ribbon Commission recommendations and the administration strategy, and our Secretary has testified that it serves as an excellent framework for further discussion and eventual enactment, we hope, of a bill that would allow us to move forward. Now, at this point, I certainly can't predict the fate of that bill. I mentioned that it's been introduced in the Senate and certainly has outstanding leadership and interest in the Senate. But it remains to be seen when or if it will be voted on in the Senate, and then, of course, its fate in the House remains to be seen. But the fact that there has been significant activity moving ahead with these recommendations and moving towards a workable solution for the back end of the fuel cycle is very much an activity that we welcome and encourage its success. Let me turn then to just a few comments on Fukushima. Of course, in the early days after the accident, we mobilized a tremendous assistance program to our colleagues and friends in Japan, massive quantities of equipment, personnel from not only the Department of Energy, but other agencies like the Nuclear Regulatory Commission also made substantial contributions. But now, as the accident is well behind us and more into a cleanup phase, we're asking careful questions now about what can we learn from the accident at Fukushima. And just as the nuclear industry learned from 3 Mile Island, from Chernobyl, from any of the incidents that have taken place that did not lead to accidents but were still serious within this country, we need to analyze the Fukushima accident and understand if there are additional lessons that we should bring to bear to improve the safety of U.S. or other plants around the world. In order to do this, we're using the best severe accident management codes that we have in this country. These are the MELCOR package of codes. A number of laboratories are working together with Sandia in the lead. Quite a bit of assistance from the Japanese in providing input data. And we're trying to understand whether we can accurately predict, using MELCOR, the progression of the accidents at Fukushima. From this, we may learn that our codes are just fine. We may learn that there are elements of our codes that need to be further improved. And in either case, we're moving towards higher confidence in the codes that we have and higher confidence then as we apply those codes for safe operations of U.S. plants. The next steps on this analysis program involves an international benchmarking program. It's organized through the OECD and through their sub-agency, the Nuclear Energy Agency. A number of countries are, like the United States, using their best severe accident management codes to model the Fukushima accident. The intent here is to compare the outputs of the various codes. We may find that one or another code around the world is perhaps a little bit better at predicting some particular aspect of the accident. Again, from that, our goal is to learn from Fukushima and overall improve the quality not only of our code, MELCOR, but also to improve codes around the world. This is typical, as I indicated, of the type of learning activity that has characterized nuclear programs from their very inception, and this focus on lessons learned from any opportunity certainly is a strong characteristic of nuclear power. Another area on which we are focusing post-Fukushima is actually to expand a program that was started before Fukushima, but has significantly expanded post-Fukushima. And this program focuses on the behavior of fuels in severe accidents and asks questions as to whether through fuel design or perhaps through reactor design around new fuels, we can come up with light water reactor systems that are significantly more robust in the face of accidents. There are a number of different approaches that are being studied. This slide indicates at least some of them, but we have asked the community to provide their best thinking on what might be possible to provide extremely robust fuel systems, which of course have to eventually go through the licensing process, have to be reasonably economic if they're ever to be actually used, and of course that implies they have to be amenable to mass production. But overall, this is a very important program. It's early to say exactly where it will lead, other than to say that there's quite a number of very, very good ideas, and we'll have to see how this program advances over the next few years. This slide indicates why we are particularly interested in improvements in the fuel systems, why we are interested in accident-tolerant fuels. It shows the cladding temperature under a particular set of accident conditions as a function of time after exposure to high-temperature steam. What you're seeing there in the case of a full zirconium cladding, as the curves go screaming off the chart, essentially vertically, is the exothermic reaction, the oxidation of zirconium kicking in, and we essentially lose control of the cladding temperature. You're generating large amounts of hydrogen in this process, and of course that led to the explosions at Fukushima. The other curves show what would be the situation with progressively less zirconium in the cladding. And the last few curves there that essentially stabilize in temperature have low or no zirconium in the cladding. These are indicative of the kinds of ideas that we're considering in the accident-tolerant fuel program. For example, one could look at silicon carbide claddings, which would have greatly improved characteristics for this type of an accident. Looking at specialty steels, which might be another possibility, or looking at claddings on the existing zirconium cladding. So all of these are possibilities. It's far too early to say which will be chosen as the best opportunities for accident-tolerant fuel, but this is indicative of the kinds of programs that we support within the Office of Nuclear Energy, attempting to make sure that another Fukushima never happens around the world. As I turn to the university programs then, and of course you're going to be hearing a lot more about this over the rest of this webinar. In 2013, the Office of Nuclear Energy consolidated a number of our competitions on R&D opportunities in order to provide a more efficient opportunity for the university programs to participate. This included our nuclear energy university programs, and it also included our so-called nuclear energy enabling technologies work. And we intend to continue in FY14 with this consolidated cooperation, again with the idea that it simplifies participation of the university community and better enables each one of you to find areas where you would welcome the competition for some of the funds that will be awarded under these different funding opportunities. Our Nuclear Energy University program has now been going a number of years. I indicated, I think earlier, that we dedicate 20% of the R&D funds within the Office of Nuclear Energy to competitive selection of the winners in the so-called NEAP program. Substantial amounts of funds, approaching $300 million, have now been awarded to a wide range of universities spread across the entire country. I might note that we do not award any of these funds to international schools, but as I'll note in a few minutes, we still welcome the participation of international universities with the proviso that their funding has to be provided from their host country. The university programs are structured as shown on this slide, and reflects the different parts of our program that we hope provide the universities with the best opportunities to participate in our programs. The programs range from ones that are actually program directed, where there are very substantial efforts that we identify from our program managers and encourage consortia of universities to work together and pool their expertise in so-called integrated research projects. And in the program supporting category, these certainly have a strong nexus with our programs, and the general topics are identified by our program managers, but there's considerably more latitude in exactly how different applicants may choose to impact and address the challenges that we've identified. Some of these grants are for infrastructure, either for reactor upgrades for university reactors or for general scientific equipment. In addition, the largest fraction of the awards are for research and development programs, projects led by principal investigators, and these are almost always typically one university, perhaps more than one professor, and a number of students at that university. We also looked at mission supporting activities, which are much more loosely tied to the programs, but still, of course, highly relevant to the general area of nuclear energy, nuclear technologies, and support the overall expertise important in the use of nuclear energy. Within this program would be the Integrated University program that I mentioned, which has provided scholarships and fellowships in the past. That program may well evolve over the next over this next year, and I indicated that back when I discussed the budget. So we'll wait and see what happens on the Integrated University programs. I mentioned that some of our awards are so-called IRPs, Integrated Research Projects. These are much larger grants. They're to groups or a consortium of universities. They're focused on a very broad issue. The 2013 award was asking universities to explore how they could generate materials with very substantial amounts of displacement damage and then correlate that back to neutron damage that would be experienced in a reactor environment. Our interest, of course, in this is that if we only rely on existing reactor environments, we're limited in the rate at which we can generate displacements, generate damage in materials, and therefore understand materials under higher and higher irradiations. To the extent that one can, as the winner indicated, use ion beams to introduce substantial amounts of damage and then correlate that back to the neutron case, that would be a substantial advance in our tool bag to better understand materials under high irradiation conditions. A number of universities participated in this, including a number of international universities. And again, my comment that no funds from my office are going abroad, but the other countries are supporting the activities within their own country. So this is an example of an IRP. It's one that we are most enthusiastic about, and one that we hope can usher in a new way of understanding neutron damage in materials under extremely high intensity and long duration irradiations. We show a little bit of data here on the 2013 awards in general. You can note how the overall funding was divided among fuel cycle R&D, reactor concept R&D, and under advanced modeling. So this is indicative of the funds that we hope to have available in 2014, but again, until we know the details on the budget, we can't tell you precisely what the amount of the awards will be in 2014, but we hope they will be of this same general magnitude. We also awarded in 2013 a number of infrastructure awards. There were 2 major reactor upgrades, a number of minor reactor upgrades, and a significant number of general scientific infrastructure type awards that can help universities as they perhaps are equipping a laboratory or have relatively significant needs for instrumentation. Again, this is the infrastructure awards for 2013. Probably will be roughly comparable in 2014, but we'll have to see not only on the budgets, but also on the strength of the different proposals that we get in each of the different areas before we identify the best allocation of funds. In the nuclear energy enabling technologies area, and I indicated earlier that we coordinate this request for proposals with the specific nuclear energy university program. These cross-cutting areas represent important areas of study without being completely specific to reactors or fuel cycles or any particular precise application within the program. But by cross-cutting, we mean that they can have a broad application in different aspects of our program. For example, the areas that will be considered for emphasis within this program will be different reactor materials, an emphasis on advanced sensors and instrumentation, and on advanced manufacturing techniques. So these will be areas where we would welcome proposals within the so-called NEET area, or Nuclear Energy Enabling Technologies area. In 2013, those NEET awards were made to the tune of somewhat under $10 million, and this indicates the distribution of those awards by those different categories. And again, the precise numbers for FY14 will depend on the dollars that we're able to make available, as well as the strength of individual proposals that are made within each of those different areas. But this is indicative of what we'll be looking for in 2014 as well. In terms of general program areas for 2014, again, you'll have more discussion on this on subsequent slides, but you'll note that we anticipate another round of requests on integrated research projects, and those will be further defined through the course of this discussion as you listen to the webinar. There'll be continuing requests in the program and mission support area, supporting each of the different major efforts within our office, and the nuclear energy enabling technologies area will also have requests for 2014. And in all of these, we're hoping that you'll put your best creative thinking into preparing proposals and joining in this competition. I also wanted to mention that we've taken some pains to assure that as you participate in these programs, you also have access to key facilities around the country. We recognize that some of the proposals are going to require unique facilities that very probably are not available at your, or perhaps at any of the universities across the country. So through the National Scientific User Facility Program, we've packaged together a number of key facilities related to nuclear technologies that you could call upon as you develop your proposal, and you could suggest utilization of these as a component of your program. These facilities would provide specific capabilities. Perhaps one example would be the ATR, the Advanced Test Reactor at the Idaho National Lab, is one example of the National Scientific User Facility Program. And then we also note on here the possibility of purchase of scientific equipment, as well as a continuing need that we see in this country to reestablish a transient testing capability. And we're now working through the process of identifying where that facility may be located. But then there will be many questions related to how does one best use that facility, best instrument that facility, and those may be opportunities for university participation as well. Let me close with the observation that around the world we see significant interest in nuclear power. Depending on who's counting, there's of the order of 70 plants under construction around the world. Several of these are involving U.S. technologies. The Westinghouse passively safe AP1000 has 4 units under construction in China. I believe they've recently announced another 8 units that will be starting into construction in China. AP1000 has 4 units under construction in the United States at the Summer and Vogtle facilities in South Carolina and Georgia. So substantial interest remains in nuclear energy around the world, and that, I believe, provides significant impetus to each of the university programs as you seek to provide the leaders that will be needed for those new reactors and the new programs that are shaping up around the world. Nuclear energy remains a vibrant technology around the world, and you can contribute to it. Let me close with a slide that I've used in many presentations. It's one you've probably seen. It's a montage pieced together by NASA of the Earth taken at night from space. There's clearly areas of very intense lighting on this slide, but there's also many dark areas. My dream, and I hope your dream, is that nuclear power contributes to the clean energy that's going to be needed in order to light up many more of those areas as we look into the future. There's certainly many countries around the world that are almost desperate in their needs for additional energy resources. And your work and our work in the Office of Nuclear Energy is focused on providing clean nuclear energy for the people of the world. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of the webinar.